Hello, and welcome to... I don't know what to call this thing yet, but I do know what happened this last week in gaming, so I'm here to get you caught up. This week we've got Layoffs. Okay, there's some other stuff too, but that's the big story, and I'll get right to it, but I first want to give an enormous thank you to my supporters on Patreon who go above and beyond every month to support the channels, and I cannot thank them enough. There is a link below if you would like to join them. Our main story this week is, of course, how we came into the week, with Microsoft laying out plans to lay off a staggering 4,800 employees. This includes 3,200 employees from the Xbox division, which is roughly 20% of the entire Xbox division, and will be divesting themselves of 5 studios. Those studios are Compulsion Games, developers of We Happy Few and South of Midnight, and Double Fine, who are probably most notable for Psychonauts. Both have been given independence and a runway of funding, with both studios releasing statements that they own the IP they developed. The next two are Ninja Theory, developers of Hellblade, and Kung Fu Chaos, which I may be the only person to remember that game, and frankly that might be for the best, and Undead Labs, developers of the State of Decay franchise. Both of these studios have found new ownership and funding for Senua and State of Decay 3, which also had its first gameplay revealed just a couple weeks ago. The cynic in me believes the rumor that this was done to help make them look good for a sale. It's seemingly very close to release, and I think it has great potential, so seeing that game cancelled would have been super disappointing to me personally. And finally, Arcane Studios, developers of Dishonored, Prey, Deathloop, Redfall, and Arx Fatalis, which is going to be the footage for the rest of the video. Arcane has begun consultation proceedings to review potential strategic options. And I don't think you need to know French to know that's not good. But, you know, labor rights, so it's something, at least. Let's go through the other studios for which we know something. ZeniMax Online Studios, the team that's been running Elder Scrolls Online for as long as that game's been running, has been cut basically in half, making that game's future a little bit uncertain at the moment. id Software, developers of Quake and Doom, have been cut down by 50 to 75%, depending on which estimate you want to believe. Exact numbers are rarely given about this kind of thing, so it's all first-hand estimates and extrapolations from how many tweets there have been. And speaking of tweets, after several former staff members tweeted about how they were doubtful id had the staff left to actually make games, id's social account posted that they were down to roughly the size they were for Doom 2016, and they're holding down the fort. As something of a weirdo, can I just say I'm a touch excited that Quake is being mentioned again? It has been a long time since we've had a good Quake. Obsidian Entertainment also lost a quarter of their staff, and they've cancelled multiple games that were in development, including Avowed 2, and they're beginning development on a Fallout game. Reporting says they're actually keeping a small team working on the cancelled Avowed game for reasons, and if you ask me, it sounds a lot like what was set to be Outer Worlds 3 is instead being turned into this new Fallout game. It'll be interesting to see if any of that DNA can still be felt in whatever ends up releasing. So those are the layoffs as they currently stand, because that headline number, the 3,200 people getting laid off, yeah, so it was only 1,600 on Monday, and the other 1,600 are... nobody knows. No idea where, no idea when, just, you know, that's hanging over the head of every single person working under the Xbox brand. And another detail that's really getting overlooked in most reporting is that Xbox is also cutting their vendor spend. We translate that into something more akin to human. Xbox makes extensive use of full-time contractors that are doing work for Xbox, but are legally under the employ of an external agency, another company. These contractor agencies are vendors in corporate speak, so this is effectively a reduction of 50% of their full-time contractor workforce, which doesn't need to be reported as additional layoffs. So the total number of people losing a job in this is actually even higher. I'm just gonna say it, this is fucked up. Pardon my language, but I think it's warranted. Under all this stress, with an incredibly uncertain future and their workforce absolutely chunked down, these developers are supposed to be releasing more games? That's not quite how this works. And no, vibe coding isn't good enough to make up the difference. So this is gonna suck, like, a lot, for a lot of people. When the dust settles, I just hope we get some brutal tell-all interviews and documentaries out of this period, because it's gonna be very interesting what this all looked like behind the scenes. Moving on, kinda. All that happened on Monday, and then on Friday, Asha Sharma. I got through that whole thing without mentioning her. Okay, so Asha Sharma is Xbox's CEO after Phil Spencer got the boot a few months ago. She came from Microsoft's Core AI division with no background in games, and she's been the one driving all the changes recently, like dropping Gaming Copilot, the price dip on Game Pass, and using the Xbox name instead of Microsoft Gaming, and also laying off 1,600 people with another 1,600 coming. Yeah, so she's going to co-lead the US Federal Reserve's Productivity and Jobs Task Force, which is tasked with assessing the economic impact of new general-purpose technologies, including artificial intelligence, to inform the Federal Reserve's policy judgments. I'm gonna stop there because government agencies are not my beat. I just thought the juxtaposition was interesting, so I am presenting it to you. Moving on to more layoffs, but this time not from Xbox, they're from Ubisoft. Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced, a remaster of the 2013 original, is now the best reviewed game in the series since, well, Black Flag. Naturally, this is being rewarded with layoffs of those studios because that's just what we do now, apparently. Now for an update on Sony stuff. After last week's announcement by Sony that they would no longer be producing PlayStation discs after 2027, they've clarified that publishers and developers will still be able to order discs for existing games. And they're sticking to that because only physical releases of digital codes will be available for new titles. That's a code in a box, just to be clear. People are not fond of this, and the backlash has been pretty intense. I agree, and I'll get into that, but let's talk about why this is happening, why it makes sense for Sony. First, how many sales are actually digital? There's differences in how these numbers are all collected and reported, so take it with a grain of salt. But Capcom, which does great business on PC where everything is digital, has stated that over 90% of their sales are digital. Sony themselves has cited 80 to 85% of their sales are digital, and Nintendo is still holding a roughly 50-50 split. So yeah, the consumer movement is there, but that's not really why. For a physical sale of a $70 first-party game, Sony gets about $45 minus some relevant taxes and etc. For a third-party game, so something like whatever EA's football games are called now, Sony gets about $10 from licensing fees, and the publisher gets about $35. For a digital sale of a $70 first-party game, Sony gets $70. Again, the taxes thing, we're keeping it simple. For a third-party game, Sony gets to take a much higher platform fee, and they pocket about $21 of that game sale, while the publisher gets $49 of those dollars. This works out great for both parties. Remember when they were selling digital distribution to PC gamers and they told us the prices would be lower? Yeah, me too. We do get pretty great sales though. I'm a PC gamer where physical media hasn't been a real thing since before I switched to PC, and my videos are exclusively digital, so I don't have a horse in this race or a leg to stand on. But I will always champion media preservation because how a medium develops is just as interesting and valuable as the works themselves. So yeah, I don't like this. I've missed my shelves of games in their cases ever since I moved to PC. Thankfully, game preservation on PC is a pretty different beast than it is on console. The footage you've been seeing in the background for the last however long it's been is a game from 2002. I'm actually running it via something called Arx Libertatis, a fan-made source port that was last updated in 2022. And I found out about this project from the PC Gaming Wiki. This is the biggest argument in favor of PC gaming. There are often pretty easily accessible means to keep old games running and even update them for modern hardware and capabilities. But Sony, literally just last week, removed ownership of like 5,000 movies from people's accounts. They can revoke your ownership of anything at a moment's notice, and have even now done so. Also, they're shutting down the PSN store for both the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation Vita in a year, so make sure to download what you own while you still can. Theme of the episode: companies are not your friend, and you have more in common with the average person on the street than anyone with a C in front of their title. Remember that, and don't let these jagoffs trick you into thinking they care about you. In neutral news, Nintendo is rolling out a revision to the Nintendo Switch 2 in Europe, which is slightly heavier, but has user-replaceable batteries. Naturally, this is because of regulatory legislation that would be absolutely impossible for other regions to replicate. Anyway, this will include the system itself, the Joy-Cons, and the Pro Controller. However, rather than updating the original Switch to comply with these laws, the Switch 1 hardware is being discontinued in Europe in February of next year. And finally, congratulations to Cyberpunk 2077 for reaching 40 million sales after what I would charitably describe as an extremely unflattering launch. I've actually only just started playing it myself. I didn't really have the hardware to do it justice until relatively recently, so I can really only comment enough to say congrats, and good work sticking with it after that release. You'll love to see it. Anyway, I'm afraid that bundle of downers is what I've got for you this week. Let me know what cocktail you're mixing up while we watch the rest of the video game crash of 2026 unfold in real time. And as always, have a great one.